So today we're going to start with nature versus nurture. So let's define nature. Nature is going to be your biology or your genetics, or essentially the random set of genes that you so happen to be born with, okay? So this random set that you received from mom and dad. Nurture has to do with your environment or your culture. So that environment starts while you're in utero, and it continues to exist for you depending upon which family you were born into, which state you were born into, which country, etc. So a question that we always have in psychology is how much of what you see in someone's personality and their traits is from their genes, or is it from their environment? And that's the big question that we're always talking about. Generally speaking, what we find is that it's usually a combination of the two. So who you are is in part your genetic endowment, and also in part how you were raised. Did you receive healthy nutrients? Did you have access to books? All those sorts of things. All of those types of things contribute to who you are. And so we're going to talk more about that in the next section. So we were talking about the random genes that you get at the point of conception. So let's talk a little bit about conception. So this is where the sperm and the egg meet. You might remember that from sex ed, okay? This is a little picture that depicts that process. And when that starts, what you're going to see is that the cell begins to divide and multiply, and then it is going to adhere to the uterine wall, okay? At which point, that takes a little while for that process to happen. And once it adheres to the uterine wall, that zygote, the cells start to become a little bit more specialized, and they're going to start forming the beginnings of organs and body parts. The second stage is this embryonic stage, and the embryo is essentially after it has implanted in the lining of the uterus. So at this point, you would be able to, if you did a vaginal ultrasound, you may be able to see something has implanted on the uterine lining or the wall of the uterus. Now, you will not be able to see what it is. You wouldn't know exactly what was going on, but at about week 3, you might be able to see some implantation happening, okay? So at this point, you're going to start to see the development of organs and basic structures, like the heart is one of the first organs to develop. Some women, even at this point, still don't know that they are pregnant. So also what's developing at this point is the placenta. So the placenta was basically going to be this conduit that makes sure that nutrients get to the embryo at first and then the fetus in the next stage of development. So I'm going to show you another picture. This could actually be a little bit bigger. It's kind of hard to see. But you can move through this picture and you will be able to see all the different stages of development and some of the key things that happen at each size or stage. So what are some things that could disrupt this process? So as you can see, the fetal stage, and at this point, most women are completely aware that they are pregnant, unless you have a really, some periods are just not regular. So occasionally, if your period is not regular, you might not notice. But at this age, okay, we're going to start to see the most development in the fetal stage. This is where most of development occurs. So what are some things that could damage the fetus, or what are some things that could have issues in pregnancy? So these are going to be prenatal influences. And some of these things are things in the environment that the mother could either consume while she's aware of it, or that she could consume inadvertently because she doesn't realize she's pregnant. So one of the most common ones is alcohol, which causes something called fetal alcohol syndrome, which is one of the primary causes of preventable intellectual disability. Smoking can result in low birth weight or preemies, or sudden infant death syndrome, which is SIDS. Drugs, so any of these drugs, so either this can be prescribed drugs that mothers may be prescribed and then take without being aware that they're pregnant, or this can be illegal substances. So here are some of the influences if you so happen to drink while you're pregnant. Now, how much you have to drink to get fetal alcohol syndrome varies from woman to woman, is unclear. There was a point in which they recommended that, 2 glasses of wine was okay. That is no longer the best science. They know now that any amount of drinking could be detrimental depending upon the child. Usually you have the most profound effects when you drink the most.